Okay, so let's see. It looks like this is recording. Do you mind if I
Oh,
sit this
no,
right
honey.
here
No,
so it'll
no.
pick you up real well?
Mm-hmm.
I guess to start off with, Loretta, well, I guess to start off with, I have to say formally, my name's Susan West, and it is July 8th, 2015, and I'm in Buxton talking with Loretta O'Neill. Loretta, can you tell me where you were born and when you were born?
I was born August the 30th, 1931, where the school is across from the Cape Hatteras High School.
Okay.
The one that the Williams girl story had.
Okay, yes.
My grandmother and grandfather had a 2-story house there, and my grandfather was James O. Casey. He used to be the assistant keeper of the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse.
Okay.
And my grandmother was Cora Lee Casey. And at the time, my mother was living there while my dad was away looking for work.
Okay. So this was 1931.
1931.
Okay. So that would be Depression years.
Yes. And I was premature. I only weighed 4 pounds when I was born. And back then, they didn't even think I would live.
So, did a doctor deliver you or a midwife?
You know, I'm, if I remember correctly, I believe it was a midwife, but I'm not sure on that.
Okay.
But anyhow, we stayed with them, my mom tells me, for some time, and then my dad got a job with the Civil Service, and he was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for 16 years on a ship.
Okay. What did he do? What kind of work did he do?
Honey, I'm not really sure what they did at that time. Anyhow, his service with that boat helped him in his Coast Guard years.
Okay.
He left that and went in the Coast Guard and retired first class in the Coast Guard.
Okay. So that time on that boat helped him maybe with his
For his
time.
retirement, yes.
Okay.
But anyhow...
So, did you and your mom, did you have brothers and sisters?
I have one brother. I'm 5 years older than he is.
Okay.
His name is Edmund Gordon Midget. He lives in Gibbstown, New Jersey.
Okay. So,
But
did you all go to Philadelphia to live?
my mother and I went to Philadelphia. We lived up there for 3 years. In fact, we lived with Miss Leona Jeanette and Mr. Jonas Jeanette. And my mother and daddy, Edmund and Linda, they rented a house together. Mr. Jonas was up there at the same time.
Was he working on the boat?
No, I'm not sure about all that. I have distant memories of living up there. I have memories of the snow, of being in this big store called the Big Bear store.
The Big Bear.
Uh-huh. It was, I guess, something like a Big Roses or something like that. But anyhow, let's see, in 1930... Yeah, 1935, my mom and I moved back to Buxton.
Okay.
And we lived in this yellow house over here, which was my grandfather, Christopher Midget's house, my dad's father's home.
Okay.
And
so both of your parents were from Buxton?
Yes, they were. Uh-huh.
Okay.
My grandfather, Christopher, was cook for the Cape Point Coast Guard station for many, many years.
Oh, okay.
And when I was just a little tyke from the age of about 6, I used to ride out early mornings with him to the Coast Guard station. I would sit on the steps and play with shells while he cooked their breakfast and lunch.
Okay.
And I remember so well this gentleman from Avon, a Mr. Gray, would sit by me sometimes, and he would tell me what the shells represented. Like there was a Scots bonnet and a shell they called the pig, and the starfish, the devil's pocketbook. Oh, so many.
Oh my goodness.
I can close my eyes and just see us sitting there now with those shells and him pointing out what each one was to me.
Now,
that was Collins Gray's father when he was in the Coast Guard.
Okay.
They used to do that. And then
where was the Coast Guard station?
it was right out on the point, Cape Point.
Oh, it
right
was?
on the point then.
Okay, out on the beach.
Yeah, right on the beach,
okay.
yeah.
And how did you grandfather...
And we got out there by horse and cart.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so in their cars, we'd go up a causeway, right out to the beach, get on the bank of the beach, and then cruise right down to the station.
And did your grandfather own the horse?
Oh, yes, he owned his own horse. His horse's name was Jim.
Jim? That's a good name.
And my grandfather always had a real big garden. And he grew everything you could think of in that garden. Right down here, where my nephew lives now. That was a huge garden.
Okay. And do you remember what kind of food he used to cook at the station?
Oh, well, whatever they had, I remember he used to laugh. They had lots of beans. They cooked lots of pots of beans, and lots of canned goods that they would send down. They used lots of fish in different ways, and seafood that they could get, clam chowder, oysters, stuff like that, and that was all brought down. Mostly, I'm not sure about for the stations, but I guess it was for them too, because that's all I can remember. They had Mr. Charlie Williams from Avon. He had a big truck, and he would go to Norfolk every week, and he would get all this meat and whatever anybody wanted. If we needed a pair of shoes, a winter coat, a piece of furniture, God bless his heart. That man, oh, he deserves a special star, because from Rodanthe to Hatteras, everybody used him to get what they needed. And I remember so well, one Easter my mom let him get me a 2-piece suit and a pair of shoes, and he brought back a navy blue suede pocketbook, little one, that matched the shoes. He says, now, Linda, you didn't order this, so if you don't want it, you don't have to take it. But I remember so well that pocketbook was $1.99.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
she says, well, back then that was even a lot.
Yes.
Oh, she says, I think we can manage it. And this sticks in my mind so vividly. And he turned around to her and he says, you know something, young lady, to my mom? I wish everybody was honest as you are. You always pay what you can, because he let everybody get it on credit.
Okay.
And he'd always say, you always have a payment. And he says, so many times I hear this, well, Charlie, I really shouldn't have ordered that. I just can't pay for it now. But it's so funny, Susan, how some things will stick in your mind all these years.
It is, isn't it? Some of the things I remember, I'm not sure why I remember them, and other things why I don't remember other things. So your dad was born here in Buxton, and he was a midget.
Yes.
And what was his first name?
Edmund.
Edmund. Okay.
Edmund Daly Midget. He retired in Elizabeth City, the Coast Guard station up there.
Okay.
And my mother was Linda Celestial Casey Midget.
And she was born here in Buxton?
And she was born here in Buxton, too.
Well, Casey, I don't remember ever hearing that name before.
I don't believe there's ever... I don't remember of ever being another family of Casey, to be honest with you.
Okay. It's Casey, not Casey.
No, Casey, C-A-S-E-Y.
Okay.
And my grandmother, Cora Lee, was a spinster before she was married, and there were spincers on Ocracoke.
Okay.
And she had people that lived on Ocracoke.
Okay. Do you know if she had people who lived here in Buxton?
Just her children, as far as I know. Well, she had a brother. Yeah, Warren Spencer. He was in the Merchant Marines. He went around the world several times. He used to send us cards from different countries he would go to, you know. And when my mother and her sister Edna were teenagers, he always sent them nice clothes from France and all these Italy, all these different places he went to. They always had real nice dresses and hats and different things that he would send them, you know.
That is great, exciting.
And
do you were born in their house? Do you remember them real well?
Oh yes. Well, like I said, he was assistant keeper of the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, and his whole family lived out there for until 19 and let me see now. My mother was a teenager and went to school. Do you know where Mr. Guy Quigley's house is, next door to one house over from Janet and Eldon Gaskin's house, the big house?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
That's where the schoolhouse was when my mother was a teenager.
Oh, it was?
Yes, and they had to walk from where the lighthouse was, then, you know, before they moved it, way back then, and out through the woods to the school. And she used to tell me how frightening it was because there were so many cows and horses wild then over in the woods.
Oh my
and they
goodness.
walked through the woods at a path. And how they used to hide behind trees because they were afraid of a horse or a cow.
That was a long walk to school.
Yes, it was, especially in the wintertime.
Yes.
And back in those days, it wasn't grassy and pretty out there. It was all mud and water, you know, because they had pigs and cattle.
Out on the beach?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the ground always... And then some mornings, a gentleman who had a Model T car, if he was coming from the station where he was stationed, the Coast Guard, out in the village to his home, he would holler, "Come on, kids," and they'd run and jump in the back of his Model T and get a ride once in a while.
I didn't know that there was ever a school down there.
Yeah,
I always thought the school...
No, that big house that's there now was across the road down in that little sink like where you turn to go to the cemetery. Okay, until we got the highway. Then they moved that big house over on the other side of the road and made it more room for the highway.
Okay. So, were you close to both sets of your grandparents then?
My grandmother on my dad's side died when he was only 11 years old, so I didn't ever know her.
Okay.
All I know is everybody told me she had a beautiful voice, that she could sing like a bird.
Did that grandfather...
Her name was Loretta.
Oh.
Loretta Midget.
Okay. And did that grandfather remarry?
No, Granddaddy never remarried. He was always called Mr. Kit. His name was Christopher, but they always called him Kit.
Kit.
Okay. Mr. Kit Midget.
His nickname then.
Yeah.
So you were close to him too.
Oh, he was just like a father to me.
Uh-huh.
He bought me my first two-wheel bicycle, bless his heart. But he couldn't read or write. Now, his mother died when he was just a baby.
Okay.
And this couple that owned this house first adopted him, took him in. They didn't really adopt him because he kept his own name, Midget.
Uh-huh.
But that man, his name was Mr. Farrell. First of all, in that house, it's been a post office, it's been a grocery store, and it's been a
the
school.
House right over
yellow
here?
House right there.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not. And would you believe he raised my grandfather from just a tiny child and never taught him to read or write. He was more or less used like a little slave, I guess, in a way.
Uh-huh.
And he was taught to garden, and he was taught to use cut wood and ride horses, and things like that. But he was never taught to read or write.
And do you know where his father was? Was his father here?
His father was... I'm not sure, to be honest with you, what his father did. I know besides cooking for the Coast Guard, my grandfather cut net steaks a lot and sold them and used them. He fished a lot himself. And Susan, one of the most wonderful, wonderful memories is when I was about 7, 8 years old. My granddaddy and I he would take a little tin bucket and fill it with the biscuits and fish or whatever was left over from supper the night before and breakfast that morning. Put it in this little tin bucket. And he and I would hitch up the horse to the cart, and we would leave his house and go straight through the woods all the way over to the bank of the beach.
Oh my goodness.
He had a camp. He had tunneled a sand dune, and he had put paper boxes all in it.
Oh my goodness.
Excuse me, let me tell him to call back later.
Oh my goodness.
Hello? Call back later, honey. I've got someone here right now. Bye. It's my daughter. She won't mind.
Okay.
Anyhow,
so he built a camp over there.
He built like a tunnel camp.
Uh-huh.
Anyhow, he had what they called a dory. You know a boat. You know what that is.
Pretty boat.
He would go out in the ocean in his dory with his nets and set his nets. I would stay up there. I wasn't allowed to go in the camp by myself because he didn't want it to cave in maybe or something.
Right.
I was to sit in the shade of the opening of it and shells again. I always collected shells and played with shells.
Uh-huh.
And that is one of the most wonderful memories because he was just a little man. He was only about, probably about 5'8 and a half.
Uh-huh.
He wasn't a big man.
Uh-huh.
And then after he would fish, we'd stay just about the day. And after he would fish his nets, if he caught something, he'd have the bucket and get them in the bucket, and here we'd head back for home, and he'd go to the fish table and clean the fish. And,
what a great adventure.
oh, yes, and we always could get grapes and blackberries. The woods were full of them then.
Really?
Oh, yes, and the most beautiful dogwood trees you've ever seen in your life.
Were there a lot of dogwoods
Oh,
here?
my land. Well, the roads were all deep, rutted sand, you know.
Right.
And the dogwoods just overlapped over the roads, and big, beautiful oaks. We always got the I think of it in a minute. The berries that grows on the oaks, acorns.
Okay.
We used to get them green and make necklaces and bracelets and rings out of them. And then we'd get them when they turned brown and eat them because it was just like a nut, like a good...
Really?
Yes.
Did you have to roast
we ate
them?
them many. We didn't. We did. Our parents roasted them sometime.
Okay.
But we never did. We kids just peeled them, ate them like they were.
Uh-huh. And grapes and blackberries.
Oh, yeah, grapes and blackberries were plentiful all through the woods. In fact, even just up 2 houses, where my grandfather's house is, and then the next house, on that side of that house, oh, the blackberries were just so thick years ago, you could just go get a quart when they were in season just about any time.
Oh, my goodness. Isn't that something? Makes me hungry.
Oh, those blackberry dumplings, grape dumplings.
Grape dumplings?
Oh,
no,
heavens,
I've never
yes.
heard of a grape dumpling.
Oh, yes. My mama cooked grapes, and then she'd make dumplings, and she always made a lemon sauce to pour over the dumpling. It was so good.
So, would she cook the grapes, like stew them?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yeah, she sort of stewed them with a little bit of sugar,
Uh-huh.
cooked them down, you know, and sometimes she would strain them and get the seed all out, you know.
Right.
But the hulls would be soft by then. She would use them to make the dumplings out of it.
I've never heard of a grape dumpling before, but I know
Oh,
I would love
honey,
it.
yes.
Yeah.
Goodness.
So, I'm confused. Was it you and your mom came back here to live, or your dad came back too?
No, just Mom and I.
Okay.
Dad stayed up there and worked. He
Uh-huh.
worked up there. In fact, let's see. I was born in 1931, and my brother was born here in Buxton, in this house right in front of me. That was their home.
Okay.
After we left my grandfather's home, they bought the house that's over here in front of me. It was only 2 rooms.
Oh,
A
my
living
goodness.
room, dining room, kitchen, and 1 big bedroom. That's all it was when they bought it.
Wow.
And that's all we had for many, many years. And then as they could, they would add a room on. And
Now, your parents or your grandparents?
my parents,
Your
my mom and
parents
dad,
built
yeah.
that. And so
But
they just built onto it as they could.
But my dad always believed in, if you could pay for it, you could have it. But you didn't go in big debt.
Uh-huh.
So they would just scrimp, they used to say, and save till they could get enough lumber and the money to pay someone. And they added the other. Now it has, it still only has 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, dining room and kitchen in it right now.
And are you related to whoever lives there now?
My brother owns it. No one lives in it now.
Oh, okay.
My brother owns it.
Okay. Does he come down very?
Yes, he gets down a couple times a year.
That's good.
Yeah. He's just had his 79th birthday.
Okay.
And, growing up, it was just well, if you read that, you'll see. It was just so wonderful. We had nothing. What I mean is, everybody just about, there might have been maybe 3 families on Buxton that had what they called a Delco, that had lights and indoor bathrooms. Everybody else had outdoor bathrooms and kerosene lamps and pump water.
Uh-huh.
And,
well water. And was the well water good, or
we had wonderful well water.
Did you?
It was clear as a crystal and so cold all the time.
Okay.
But now it's all the trees and all, I guess it's been removed. I don't know what happened. I had well water here until 95.
Okay.
And then the well went dry and we had to go to city water.
Oh my goodness.
But growing up here was fantastic.
So, how much land do you think your family?
Well, my
grandfather.
grandfather, my father owned from the road where he is to where I am.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather owned all this land, all back here, over to the house that's next door to him,
Okay.
and all that land back of him, which my son George owns now. He
Okay.
bought it all. And then he owned land over in the woods.
Okay. And did he do anything with the land in the woods?
No.
Uh-huh.
Just cut
Lumber?
fish steaks, you know what I mean, net steaks, stuff like that. But my mom, one year, was given by her sister a hand-cranked 1-quart ice cream maker. And oh boy, she would make this 1 quart of ice cream. She would make sure every child on this back road that knew she had that ice cream maker got at least a spoon. Because you didn't get a whole lot in a quart. And the older lady across the street from us, she always, that was my grandfather's half-sister, Miss Charlotte Tolson. She always made sure she got a taste of that ice cream.
Well, where did she get the cream or the milk and all?
She used canned milk.
Okay.
And she cooked her custard, and it always came out, oh, it was so good. And when strawberries were in season, Granddaddy always gave her strawberries.
Mm.
And Mom and Dad in the 40s, had a real big grapefruit tree in the backyard that they got bushels and bushels of grapefruit
a grapefruit tree?
Oh, yes. I got pictures. I'm not sure in what album, because I got hundreds of albums. But I've got pictures of my mom and Mrs. Idlet, which I'm sure you don't even remember. He used to have a store up where Orman's shop was.
Okay.
But of my mom and Mrs. Idlet pulling the grapefruit from the tree and putting them in a bushel basket.
How about that?
Miss Maud White used to have a grapefruit tree and an orange tree in her yard up on the hill up there.
Do you think anybody has those now?
Huh?
Does anybody have an orange tree or grapefruit tree
Not
now?
that I know of. Today we got a real hard freeze one winter, and everything was just burnt up, ruined. My grandfather always had lime trees in his yard. We always had limes all the time.
Really?
And in fact, he had a small orange tree in his yard at one time, a real small one. I have a picture of him pulling an orange from it. But
when you were growing up, how many stores were here in Buxton?
Okay, at first there was 3 grocery stores. Mr. Holliday Gray's, Mr. Octavius Foster's, and Mr. Eve Midget's.
Okay. And where were they located?
Okay, Mr. Holliday Gray's was here.
Holiday?
Holliday. Hollivee, I believe he spelled it.
Okay.
His store was right over here on Highway 12, next to Royce Gaskin's home. I don't know if you know him or not. Anyhow, and he sold gasoline too, hand-pumped gasoline.
Okay.
Okay, then there was Mr. Eve Midget. He had a store up on Highway 12 on the right-hand side of the highway, well, the road at that time going up. And then later in years, before that though, before Mr. Eves, there was Mr. Octavius Falter on the right-hand side. He had a store. Then years later in the, let me think now, I believe it was in the late 40s. It wasn't late 40s, but in the 40s, Isaac Jeanette put a grocery store in. That was in the right-hand side. And then in the 50s, Edgar Hooper and George Fuller had the building up there where Ormond Fuller had her dress shop and that grocery store. And then they ended up selling that to Mr. Idlet.
Okay.
But all the food was brought down in trucks. And back then, if anyone had a cow and they killed the cow, the meat was all cut up, thrown in the back of the truck. Here they'd come down these sandy roads hollering, meat for sale, beef. And for a quarter you might get a whole half of a ham or something.
Oh my goodness. Isn't that something?
They always made sure that people got some of it. If they couldn't pay for it, they got it anyhow.
So
same
people
way with
didn't
gardens.
go hungry. There was always food.
No. Everybody always had, I think just about had a garden. They always had collard greens and potatoes and onions, if nothing else.
So, how far up did the village of Buxton go? I mean, it didn't go as far as the road to the lighthouse.
Went out as far as where Carol Dillon's motel is.
Okay.
Just like now.
Oh, it did. Okay.
There was homes all the way up. Well, the last one built was up. You know where Uncle Eddie's ice cream parlor is? Mm-hmm. Well, that was the last Father Is Away home that was built in Buxton.
Okay, I was wondering.
His grandparents had his grandparents lived there, and then when his father, Eddie Forter's father and mother moved here with the kids, they built a new home there.
Okay.
But
so you didn't have electricity when you were growing up?
No, not until gosh, honey, I can't even know. That's one thing I'm not sure about. What year?
Hey.
Oh, hi. How are you?
We're chatting.
Well, good. That's
Come on
good.
in, honey.
Let me shut this off. Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm talking to Loretta, picking her brain about what it was like when she was a kid here.
So what, do you post it somewhere?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to give her a copy when I get it done.
Well, give me a copy, too.
I will.
Keepsake. Give her 2 copies.
I will.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And, actually, let me shut this off.
So what do you do? Do you put it in?
Yeah. So, let's see. What were we talking? Oh, electricity. That's right. So,
It was in the the 40s, late 40s, I believe, that we got electricity.
Do you remember that making a big difference?
Oh, heavens, yes, because I was still in school, and we always had to study, by the kerosene lamps, and they didn't give out real good light.
Right.
We had what they called a mantle lamp, which was also run by kerosene, but it did give a more brighter light.
A mantle.
Mantle lamp.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
And we always had a radio, and that was by battery, a battery radio.
Okay.
And
Did you get a lot of stations?
Yes, and we had to have a wire that ran out through the window outside, a ground wire, I think they called it.
Okay.
But we had special programs we loved to watch, like the Squeaking Door and I don't know, I forgot Amos and Andy and all those stations, we got those. We played lots and lots of checkers and Chinese checkers and regular checkers and tit-tat-toe and all those kind of games is what kept us going in the winter time.
Uh-huh.
And we always had, us girls, always had a catalog to cut our paper dolls out of.
Okay.
We always had paper dolls, and it was a real treat if we had a relative that lived in the city that would get a sample book of wallpaper. And when they'd come to visit, they'd bring us that sample book of wallpaper.
What would you do with it?
We would make furniture for our paper dolls.
Oh, creative.
Oh, honey, we had all kinds of, take a box and cut out windows and doors and just decorate it with that wallpaper.
Did you have cloth dolls? Do you remember?
Well, yes, now.
Uh-huh.
When I was growing up, we had regular dolls. We didn't get a whole lot.
Uh-huh.
I had the first doll that was ever on this island that I know of that rolled her eyes.
Oh.
Most dolls, are just looking straight at you. Well, this doll baby was beautiful baby. It had a long white dress with a blue satin coat and hat, white shoes, and her eyes, when you would turn her head, her eyes would roll whichever way you turned her. My dad's brother, my Uncle Loram, was in the Coast Guard, and he bought that doll somewhere in Norfolk, Virginia, and brought it to me for Christmas one year. And I was very popular then because all the girls that came to play with me liked to hold that doll baby.
Did you play games outside much?
Oh, my heavens, yes. The children on this back road, we always had a softball game going. We always played hopscotch. We played Ring Around the Roses, jump rope. In my mom and dad's yard, we had 2 hammocks that my dad had made. We had chinaberry trees on both sides of the house in the 40s. And we had hammocks that tied on the limbs, and we all enjoyed those.
So,
We always had a band, Susan.
a band?
Us kids. We had a wash tub. We had a washboard, a comb, an old guitar with twine for strings, big spoons. Oh, we always had a band.
Oh, that is great.
Oh, my mercy. We always made birthday cakes for one another out of sand and put pokeberries on them to decorate them.
So,
Oh, we had good times.
did you know your husband your whole life?
Oh, no. I met my husband when I was 16 years old. He was from Avon, but he went in the Army at 17, And then he stayed in the Army 2 years. He got out a year, then he went in the Air Force and put 24 and a half years in.
Okay.
But anyhow, we always had watermelons. We'd gather at somebody's home and always cut a watermelon, you know. That was just wonderful. And like I said, the homemade ice cream. You remember Zane Grey?
Yes.
Well, his parents had a little store right down, let me see. Well, you know where the house is where he lived?
Yes.
Okay. Well, on this side of it was just a little building where they sold a little bit of canned goods and bread when they could get it to sell. But they also had a bigger ice cream maker. But it was hand-turned.
Okay.
And they used to let me sit on top of the ice cream maker to hold it down while they churned it. And I got a nice little bowl of ice cream for doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, my lands.
Oh.
We all just had,
Was it a big group of kids here?
Yes, honey. Let's see. In the house on the other side of my grandfather's was 4 children. Across the street in front of my mother and dad's was 2. Myself, well, we didn't consider my brother. He was too little.
Uh-huh.
he was 5 years younger.
Right.
But then we had kids up above the house up here. They always came down and played, Larry and Rod. And then we had Helen Brady and kids all that lived down the road. And there was always kids from the other road that would come over. My mother used to love to make a big pot of fudge or fry up a bunch of chicken and let all the kids come. We had the only player piano on the island. You pumped it and it had, just played beautiful music.
Right.
And when I got older, my dad was stationed out here at the Cape Hatteras Coast Guard Station. And he was always bringing what he called his young'uns home with him, the younger boys, the single boys, Mom would feed them. We'd all sing, play the piano, play games, and we always had birthday parties at night. We at each other's house when we had birthdays. We'd even snitch a watermelon once in a while if we could get by with it at night. Get caught too sometimes, get threatened.
I'm sure. Did you go to Frisco or to Avon very often?
No, not really.
Uh-huh.
No. But I'll tell you one thing. We went to church. My generation of children, when we were children, if we didn't feel like going to Sunday school and church, we did not leave our home all day long on Sundays. We could not sew on Sunday. We could not use scissors on Sunday. It was just a reverent day.
And where was your church?
Back then, our church was where Dare Building Supply is.
It was?
That's where the church was. And then they had a big 2-story building where the Methodist church is.
Okay.
They only had 2 churches then, Methodist and Pentecostal.
Okay, and was this the Pentecostal?
Uh-huh.
The one
and honey, we had the most fantastic Sunday school teachers any child in the world has ever heard. In the Methodist church, we had Mr. Nace Jeanette. Oh, he was...
Well, did you go to both churches?
Oh, yeah. See, here's how they worked it.
Yeah, explain
For so many months of the year, they would have Sunday school at 2 o'clock at the Methodist church and at 10 o'clock at the Pentecostal church. And then it would ring around. It would be in the morning at the Methodist and the evening. And they were always having revivals. My goodness, I pray. There'd be nights that you wouldn't get home till midnight.
Oh,
They would be
goodness.
having such revivals in the church.
And did people from off the
Oh,
island
yes.
come?
People would get their horse and carts and come.
Okay.
Now, we used to go to Avon lots to revivals.
Did you?
My aunt's father-in-law had one of the old commando cars, they called them, back, in the war days.
Okay.
He had bought
is that
it,
like a Jeep?
Something like that.
Uh-huh.
Anyhow, a truck it was. And 2 people could ride in the front, and then you get all in the back you could. And boy, he'd fill that truck up. Janet and I was talking about it night before last, how much fun it was to get to ride in the back of that truck and go up to Avon to a big old revival. Oh, that was just, the music was always wonderful. This island has always been talented. There's always been talent.
Has it?
Of people playing guitars and having beautiful voices for singing, and it was just.
Now, did you grow up with Miss Janet?
Yes, well, Janet was born in New Jersey, and they moved home. I'm not sure. I believe I think she was 9, but I'm not sure when they moved home. But then they moved to Virginia when she was 11.
Oh.
And they stayed up there until she was, I think, 13. I'm not sure about that either. But from then on, we've been like sisters. We grew up together and just had wonderful times together.
And what was her maiden name?
Gray.
Okay.
Her father was Mr. Matt Gray, and her mother was Lucy Gray.
Okay.
And then, in the summertime, my aunt and uncle that lived in Hatteras, right across the street from Lee Robinson's store, Millard and Nora Stowe, they would sail from Hatteras up to where the Cape Hatteras High School is in their sailboat. I would have my suitcase packed. After we had lunch, the 3 of us get in that boat and sail back to Hatteras, and I would stay there for a week visiting with them and my wonderful friend Dixie Meekins. She, I'll never forget, her father operated the boat that ran from Hatteras to Englehard, and I believe it could take, I'm not sure if it could take 2 cars or 1 car, but I know Dixie and I used to ride with him once in a while just as passengers on that boat.
Okay. Well, do you remember the name of that boat?
No, darling, I don't remember the name of it. I'm sure that there's people that would.
Okay. And her name was Dixie Meekins.
Well, she was Dixie Meekins then, and then she married one of the Coast Guard boys, and she died right, I guess it's been about 8 years ago now. But she has daughters that still lives in Hatteras.
So you used to sail from Buxton
To
with
Hatteras.
your aunt and uncle and spend...
And I can remember one time the jib on the sail got stuck, and I had to shimmy up the mast
Uh-huh.
and get it unstuck so we could shift the sail on it.
Well, when you went to Hatteras, did that seem different to you than Buxton?
Well, in some ways, but not a whole lot. The theater was at Hatteras, and that was a treat.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to go to a movie. And when I had an aunt and uncle that I was lucky enough that they liked to go to the movies once in a while, and they would take me with them to Hatteras to the movies.
Okay.
And back then, there was a bridge, a long bridge that you had to cross to go from Cridge, where the Cridge Hill station is. It's still there. It's
Uh-huh.
Coast Guard Station that's still on Highway 12.
Yes.
Well, from just past there into Hatteras, there was a
There's a
long, tall bridge. Then you had to go
Oh my goodness.
tall, rather not toll, that you had to cross to get into Hatteras.
I didn't know that.
That was back in the late 30s and early 40s. And I remember Mr. Dan Oden had a store. Well, there were several stores there, but this particular Mr. Oden, it's Oden spelled backwards now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neatos.
Oh yeah, but he was. I don't know. We kids, we used to love to go in there and buy a piece of candy because he always had something, a story to tell us. He was such a sweet old gentleman.
So, but you didn't really know those kids because you went to school here in Buxton and they had their own school.
They had their own school at that time,
Right.
yeah. But then in the 40s, see, they all consolidated, and Avon and Hatteras came up here, and Frisco had always come up here.
Okay. And do you remember when
Oh,
that happened?
definitely. So because the Hatteras people were very upset, which I could understand, for their kids to have to come all the way up here to school. But worked out fine. All the kids got along great together, and in fact, there was when I graduated, there was 10 of us, and there's 4 of us still living. Bert Austin graduated with me, and June Austin graduated with me. She's still living. Billy Hill and myself are the only ones living out of those 10. But
Did you have a graduation service?
oh
Do you
yes,
remember?
we
You
had
did.
every year. We had the wonderful plays and operettas at our school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you aren't kidding. And we never ever started school without a pledge of allegiance to the flag, singing "God Bless America," and had a prayer. And boy, that was the first thing on the list for our schools.
Did you have favorite subjects?
I loved history.
Oh, you did.
I always loved history. And I loved my teacher. Mr. Charlie Gray was my history teacher. And oh, he made everything so vivid. He
And
was
was
a
he
wonderful.
From Buxton?
Yes, he was Mr. Tommy Gray, Miss Jeanette Finnegan's father.
Okay.
Miss Maud White, oh, she was another fantastic teacher. And she was Miss Orman Fuller's mother.
Okay.
And Miss Orman Fuller was a good teacher. Miss Esther Miller and Miss Winnie Gray, that was married to Mr. Tommy Gray. Those 5 were just wonderful, wonderful teachers because they cared. They wanted us island children to learn and do well, and exceed. And honey, I believe Miss Maud White would sit there till midnight if she thought she could help us in some subject that maybe we were lax in a little bit.
Isn't
She was just that caring about us.
that something?
It was just, we had ball games at the school. We were just so fortunate for such a small area that we've always had very good schools.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as you know, we've had some majority of the kids have gone on to college from the schools here on this island.
Yeah.
A whole lot didn't go then, but lots of them did.
True. Did you travel off the island much when
No,
you were a
only
kid?
if the only time I ever got to go off the island growing up was if I had to go to a dentist.
Uh-huh.
Why then we'd have to go to Norfolk, and my mother had 2 brothers, and no, 3 brothers, and a sister that lived in Norfolk, Virginia. So we always had somewhere to stay.
That was good.
And then when the Midget brothers started the bus line, why, I would get to go once for a week in the summer to visit relatives in Norfolk. That was great. And just the ride up the beach was another story. I'll tell you, it was something else. No highway. Everybody had to get out and push because we get stuck through time. Then they would get over on the bank of the beach with the camelback. You're just going up and down. And they had a driver named Raymond Midget. I think he was a cousin to them. They used to drive once in a while. And once in a while, if it was us kids, maybe was going somewhere. I remember this one time, Malene Miller, was Malene Whittle when she died, but she's been dead several years. But one summer, I had to go to the dentist, and her mother let her go too, and she had relatives that lived in Norfolk. And Raymond let me get on the fender, one fender, and her the other fender. Yeah, talk about laws. But anyhow, we were on the bank of the beach, and by the time we got to Oregon Inlet, we were soaking wet from our hips down, where he'd go through the, because it was hard ground. It would tickle him to death, but it was our fault. We wanted to ride that way. But when we got to Oregon Inlet, he'd always make us get inside the bus. So when we went into Matio, we'd be ladylike and not know that the driver was a little kooky sometimes.
So, how did you get across Oregon Inlet?
We had the Toby Tillett had a ferry that took, I think it was 4 cars, I'm not sure.
Okay.
And that's how we got over the inlet. And on one occasion, I was by myself going to Norfolk just for my vacation. And Anderson Midget drove the bus, but his brother was going to meet him in Matio with a car, and he was going to take the car and go into Norfolk for some reason. And I remember so well, he whispered to me, he says, "You can ride to Norfolk with me. You won't have to buy a ticket to go to Norfolk." Bless his heart. I never forgot that. I used to remind him of it, and he'd say, "Yes, honey, I remember that." And he took me right to my aunt's front door and made sure I was in the house before he left. They were all good guys, those midget boys. They just, Lord, I bet you I rode with them from right across here on this highway, on Highway 12, to Hatteras. Lord, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times.
Would you just get out on the side of the highway?
Just get on the side of the highway, and most of the time by 4:30, 5 o'clock, sometimes a little later, you pretty well knew if it was good weather, they would get that far, and they were always so nice to me. They usually just went far as the post office in Hatteras at that time. But my aunt lived down, like I said, to Mr. Lee Robinson's, which was another, a good, probably half a mile or more. And they would always ride me all the way down to Mr. Lee's and turn around there and let me out. There wasn't many times that I ever had to walk from the post office and drag my suitcase. They were always so nice to me.
Well, tell me more about how did you meet your husband then?
Well, let me see. We had a play at the schoolhouse that I was in.
Do you remember what the play was?
It was, of all things, I was dressed up like well, I don't know what word to use today. In other words, they had taken cold cream and coal dust and covered me.
Okay.
You okay?
Okay.
And we were doing the Virginia reel. I'll never forget it. And I took a hold of the boy's hand that was supposed to be next to me and got that stuff all over him. And he got so worried at me. All through the rest of the play, every time I look at him, he'd give me the dirtiest look. As if to say, I'll get you later, kid. Anyhow, after it was over, where did we go? Oh, my aunt at the time had a shop up here where the toy store is, up here at the end of Buxton now.
Right.
Well, she had a shell, what she called a shell shop there. She had a hand ice grinder. That's all was in there. And she would grind up ice, pour a little bit of some kind of nectar or something on it, and we would buy it for 5 cents a little paper cup. And that's where we gathered for years. That was our gathering place. Because most all of us had to be home and in the house by 10 o'clock. Honey, I got more restrictions because I'd be 5 or 10 minutes past 10, and I'm not kidding you. My mother was really a strict woman when it came to, you're going to be in the house by 10 o'clock. Oh, if I didn't get restrictions. But that's how we met, was up there. And he asked to buy me a cup of ice, and I said, okay. And then for 4 years after that, off and on, we just dated. And all that they big, my gosh, 10 or 8 or 10, 12 of us, all, you know, we just all went in a bunch.
Right.
You know, people, we didn't, it wasn't 2s here and 3s there. Everybody went together.
Right.
And the roads were sandy, and somebody was always pushing somebody down.
So when you got married, did you get married here?
I got married in Elizabeth City.
In Elizabeth City?
Yeah, I didn't have a big wedding.
Okay.
He was stationed at Langley Air Force Base.
Okay.
And then we had 6 beautiful children. Today I have 13 great-grandchildren.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
I have 12 living grandchildren.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
And they're everyone precious. I lost a daughter 7 years ago, and I've lost 2 grandsons. And I have a daughter who lives in Florida, and I have a daughter, her family lives in New Jersey, and a son in Richmond, and then we have George and Coralie that lives here.
When you were a child growing up here, did you ever see tourists or people that you didn't know come here?
Honey, I don't think we ever saw a stranger in our life.
I was
To us, we
wondering.
knew everybody. If anybody came here, they weren't here many hours before everybody on the island knew them, believe me. We had what they call the radio station back then, where the Fessner Center is, and the pharmacist's mate was there. In fact, he ended up marrying my school teacher, Miss Nell Wise, and
What was that? The radio station?
It was stationed
Was it-
right where the Fessner Center is now.
Naval?
Yeah.
Navy? Okay.
And that's where the first, I shouldn't tell you this because I'm forgetting.
With the Fezzen and the airwaves?
Yeah, was, and my grandfather was the person that took, I forgot. Danny Couch knows all this. Anyhow, my grandfather took the man to the radio station in his horse and cart that sent the first airways
Oh my goodness.
from here.
Isn't
Yeah.
that something? Isn't that something?
Oh, we had lots of women here that delivered babies. There wasn't a whole lots of doctors that came here back then.
Well,
I remember
to ask
one
you,
doctor.
Suppose you got hurt. What happened? Suppose you got hurt or you were ill.
For instance, if you got bit by a snake, there was an elderly lady, real old elderly lady that lived here named Miss Rovine Quidley. And she would make all kinds of salves out of leaves and different things. And my mother's youngest brother got bit by a snake on his foot one day. And my grandmother rushed him to her. And honey, she fixed what she called this poultice of all this, I think it was Octagon soap and salve and all kinds of stuff mixed together. But it drew all that poison out of his foot. And he lived. Yeah. And if we got bit by a wasp, somebody always grabbed a little bit of snuff and rubbed on wherever the wasp bit us, and that would draw the poison out of it. Or if we stepped on a nail, they'd grab a piece of salt pork and tie it, put a little kerosene on it, tie it to the place where the nail went. That would draw out the poison.
Oh, my goodness.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
so
today they'd think, oh, she's lying, making up that stuff. But honey, I'm telling you, it was the truth.
So there wasn't really a doctor here.
No, and let me tell you another one. My grandfather, if someone got a real bad toothache, lots of people would go to my grandfather Kit. He would take a pair of pliers and pull the tooth out for them.
Ooh.
And then pray that they didn't get blood poison.
Oh my goodness.
And he has pulled the wrong tooth before, too. Oh, my.
Yeah, it is amazing.
And the thing that we had all this freedom. Anytime you wanted crabs or fish or oysters or scallops or anything that was in the water, you had the freedom to go get it. Nobody cared where you went. They didn't appreciate it if they had already fixed a clam bed and you went and took their clams after you. That wasn't very nice.
Right.
But
did you eat a lot of seafood growing up?
We ate lots of fish. We ate lots of game back then, too. We had deer meat. We had geese. We had ducks. We had squirrels. We had rabbit. We had birds. What they call sealing wax. They were just little birds. You'd have to have 2 or 3 dozen to get just a little, after you clean them, to get a little bit of gravy.
What are they called?
They were called sealing wax birds. Little birds that would roost up in the oak trees.
Okay.
And gosh, you take a can of prim, cut it up with potatoes and onions and honey.
What is prim?
It's you can buy it in any of the stores. It's just a little can of meat.
Okay.
And it's like a corned beef can, you know.
Okay.
And my gosh, make the most delicious meal you ever ate. Sometimes they put pastry in with it. It would be potatoes, onions, and that little bit of meat with some pastry. Anyway, nobody, I don't think.
Did you do anything?
There wasn't too many people who went hungry, if any, right? They always had something.
That's good. That's
Mm-hmm.
good. Did you do anything? Do you remember what you did at Christmas time?
Oh, Christmas. Every Christmas, both churches would have the most beautiful pageants, and the younger children would say a speech. They have a great big, especially the Methodist church, it would always have this humongous cedar. I used to even wonder where they found such a tall, big cedar. But it would be in the corner of the church, and different members or different people, anybody from anywhere that wanted to, would put, the way they would decorate it with, like, say Santa Claus was going to bring somebody a doll that Christmas. That doll might be put on the tree and was given to the child there in the church, or a color book, a book, or whatever. And then they'd make streamers out of paper, colored paper, and stars out of pasteboard, and paint it yellow. And we really had gorgeous Christmas programs.
You did?
Oh, yes. And now today it's so sad there's not even any children in some of the churches. There's children that could be there, but for some reason parents just won't get up and take them or send them.
Well, as an adult, which church did you go to?
Both of them. I had to go to both of them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you said you did as a child, but as a grown-up?
Well, as a grown-up.
When you moved back here?
Well, then, the Pentecostal church.
Yep. You're a busy lady, popular.
Hello? Yes, darling, you did. Call me back, and I'll explain it all to you, okay? Huh? Okay, bye-bye. That was my daughter in Florida.
Oh, nice.
But,
so as an adult...
in later years, the Pentecostal church went in what they called the Assembly of God. And that's what the church over here is now. In my later years, that's where I always went. I went to the Methodist church and many things too. But that's where my family went, and that's where I went mostly. But we just went all over. In my later years, I've been all over the island to different churches meeting.
Did you ever work outside of the home?
Yes, I worked cleaning cottages for years.
Here in Buxton?
In Buxton, and then growing up, I babysat.
Okay.
I used to babysit Rhonda Carroll, Ormond Fuller's first daughter. Okay. Oh, she was such a precious little girl, so pretty. She still is.
Is she?
Yes, she is. She's beautiful. And,
so you've seen a lot of changes.
Oh, just since 1970, when I moved back here permanently, the changes are just out of this world. I thought there were, which there was, changes then, from the 50s when I left and came back. But just from the 70s till now, it's
Is it
tremendous.
For the better or the worse or mixed bag?
It's mixed. There's good and there's things that's not so good. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. There's just so many rules and regulations today that I feel like they're just much too strict on, that they took away our freedom. You know what I mean? Like driving on the beach, and you're only allowed to catch so many fish, and at such and such a time, at day or night. I think all that's wrong. I don't think that's right.
It's very different.
Yes, it is. It's very different. I know those people are just doing their jobs, but it's sad. It really is. And back when I was growing up, my goodness, they had races every Sunday right out down on the bank of the beach in Hatteras and up here.
Car races?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Ball games. Had a nice big ball game going. Wonderful fish fries. And the whole community participated. And they'd come from all villages, you know. And that was just a good time of fellowship and fun. And I've got to tell you this, or Janet will kill me.
Okay.
When we were kids, our parents was very strict on us. We were definitely not supposed to go anywhere near where they sold beer, you know, or anything like that. Well, the restaurant between Frisco and Hatteras.
The quarterdeck?
Yes, the quarterdeck, where it is now, that was called a gentleman from that had moved here that lived in Frisco. His name was Mr. Tandy.
Okay.
Precious man. He had a building there, and it was called Tandy's, but it was what they considered back in those days a beer joint.
Okay.
He sold beer, you know. Well, it had a big floor where you could dance. The people, you know, adults went and danced. Well, if us teenagers could get someone to take us down there, he was very sweet about it. He would let us go in and dance for a little while. He watched us very closely. He didn't let us partake of anything we shouldn't have, or anybody bother us in any way. And by 9 o'clock, we were looking for rides to get back home anyhow, or we knew we'd be killed. And we'd always think, your mother never know. It never failed. Every time I think I ever went, I had a cousin. God bless him, he's dead now, but I loved him dearly. But the minute I'd get in the building, here he'd come. You know you're not supposed to be here. I want you out of here. Well, when I could find a ride home, and by the time lunch came the next day, Mother'd say, Loretta, did you go somewhere special last night? Well, Mom, usually, you know what we usually do? We just walk up down Eva's, get a cup of ice, or just take a walk, you know, all of us together. Didn't go anywhere south? Well, you knew by then somebody'd spilled the beans. Okay, sweetie, she'd say. You can't go out now for the next 4 or 5 nights. You disobeyed. You know you're not supposed to go there. And she'd always say, I don't call Mr. Tandy for you being there because he didn't invite you. You went on your own. She never blamed him for us going there. But it was so much fun to go and learn to dance.
Oh, yeah.
There's a girl named Agnes. She was Agnes Fulcher then. I'm not sure what her last name is now. She lives here in Buxton. But she and I used to love to get out on that floor and jitterbug. We just used to have the most fun. But they'd be, at least 5 or 6 of us. And there was one gentleman.
Did they have a record player there?
He had a jukebox in there.
Okay.
With all the up-to-date, you know, records on it.
Okay, and what kind of music?
It was all kinds of music.
Okay.
Mostly, though, country music.
Okay.
Back then, everybody was in country music. But there was one older gentleman. He was single at the time, and he had a car. And boy, they'd be 5 or 6 of us. We'd just beg him, please give us a ride down to Tandy's. I'll take you down there, but I'm not going to bring you back. And he'd get us down there, but buddy, he wasn't there to bring us back. Oh, honey.
What a fun time.
Susan, it was a wonderful time, I'm telling you. And then back then, you know, was the war. And good heavens, we'd be sitting in the classroom, and all of a sudden, you'd think every window in the building was going to be blown out. It would be shaking so from the ships that were being torpedoed off the end, point out here, you know.
You could feel that.
Oh, could you feel it? Every house in the village could feel it. And we would, the lighthouse, they moved it, you know, right up here, not far from where I live. And it was put out, and...
oh, they couldn't have a light?
No, you couldn't have no kind of lights or nothing back then.
Did you have to keep your curtains drawn?
I don't believe we did this far inside. I don't remember. Only time I ever really darkened the curtains was once in a while I used to get a migraine headache, and everything had to be dark then. But that was the only time. But my goodness, you go on the beach and your feet or your shoes, if you have on shoes, were so full of tar. There's so much tar, grease that would come up, you know.
From all the ships.
Yes, yes.
Did you ever find any goods or anything from the
I
ship?
never did. Lots of other people did. They'd find different stuff, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think between Frisco and Hatteras, somebody found some cases of fruit or something one time, or barrels, or.
Oh, goodness.
In fact, they used to say lots of the people that first settled the island came ashore in barrels from ships. We were told that anyhow.
Were you told that as a kid?
Yes,
You
many
were?
times, yeah.
When your husband was in the Air Force, where were you stationed? Where
Well,
did you live?
we were fortunate enough that I was only stationed in South Carolina, Florida, and over in Goldsboro. But in that time, he was stationed overseas 7 different times.
Oh my goodness.
And it was during the war and all, and I didn't ever go. But, just...
Well, I appreciate your time today.
Well, darling,
This is
I
fun.
appreciate you coming. You really made my day just to have the
Well,
company.
you made my day.
Because
Let
I
me
get
tell
so
you,
lonely
Loretta,
sitting here day in, day out.
I'm sure.
Very seldom see anybody except my son George and my daughter Cora. So they come by every day to check on me. I get telephone calls. I'm lucky there.
Yeah. Well, I will be back with a copy of this when I get it. It might take a while, so
Okay.
we'll just have to wait and see. I am hoping we can get somebody to transcribe it and print it all out, and I'll bring 2 copies.
Okay.
So, is there anything else you want to add today?
Darling, I think if there's anything I forgot, it's in that paper I wrote.
Yeah, and I'll make a copy of that for myself, and I'll bring that back to you.
Okay.
I appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah, there is one thing now.
Yes.
If anything drastic happened, like somebody had appendicitis or got a fish hook stuck in them, they'd send a helicopter and take them into Matteo.
Oh, they would?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, when I had my first child, when Georgie was born, I was flown out in a helicopter to Elizabeth City, and then they put me in a bomber airplane there and flew me into the Portsmouth Naval Hospital.
Oh, my goodness.
That's where he was born.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Oh.
Oh, honey.
And why did they do that?
Because at the time there was a doctor here. The doctor that was treating me was called Hornstein, Dr. Hornstein. And he had gone to Maryland to some kind of a big meeting.
Oh.
And Georgie was premature. And he came at, he was 7, almost 8 months. And he wasn't expecting to have to deliver a baby, so he had gone
to his meeting.
Yeah.
And you and Georgie surprised everybody.
That's right, yeah. And we had a nurse here at the time, Miss Juanita Jeanette. And she, at first she was going to deliver me, then she said, I think under the circumstances, we better get you to a hospital. So she called over the Coast Guard, and they made all the arrangements, and I was taken to the hospital. But what was so funny, when we left in the helicopter, the young man assured her that if anything happened, everything would be all right, that he could deliver. And then when we're flying out of Elizabeth City, he grabbed my hand and he says, "Ms. O'Neill, please don't have that baby now. I've never delivered a child before. I just didn't want to admit it." And then I was in labor for 78 hours.
Oh my goodness!
So,
do you have a middle name?
Lee.
Loretta Lee.
L-E-E. Lee.
That's pretty.
We had lots of Lees in my family. My grandmother was Cora Lee. I have a daughter, Cora Lee. I have an aunt that was Margaret Lee.
Okay.
I have a cousin that's Margaret Lee.
Okay.
And then I had a cousin, Teresa Lee.
That is a lot of Lees.
For some reason, they just like Lee.
Loretta is a pretty name. Well, thank you.
Thank you, honey. And sometime when you have time, just come back and visit.
I will.
I'd
I
love for you
will.
to.
Yes, because I'm not